Would you please proceed to the table because we will have the question and answer session. And I would also like to invite Professor Masusi, Professor Ken, Professor Chen, and Professor Clark to join the question and answer session, please. Okay, we will now take questions from the floor. Please raise your hand if you have questions, and our colleagues will pass you the microphone.
Thank you for your helpful comments. I'd like to ask about the different comments. So someone mentioned that you look at the viewers' comments and sometimes some are more important than others. Would it be possible to simply bold the ones that are important and so that we can know if they're contradictory comments, which ones we should pay attention to?
That may be possible. I guess that RGC could think about that. The question, I think, is, and this is an observation I made looking at some of the review, that sometimes the reviewers make comments which are a bit disparate, and not all of them seems to be really relevant. So I don't think that in assessing the reviewer of the grant, certainly I don't do it, I'm sure that my colleagues don't do it, they will hold you to every single point. What is actually assessed in looking at a revised application is whether there is a reasonable response and whether actually the quality, clarity of the application has improved. So well, one can do that, but this is not really an important point. The important point is that the revised application should meet all the criteria in a better way, as our colleagues have previously described. Clarity is important, justification is important, showing that you really understand the potential of what you are proposing, and also one little thing, which always makes a very good impression, is whether you also consider the possibility of failures and what you will do if part of what you are suggesting fails. So,
I think your question was more directed on really seeking a means of feedback from the panels and explanation as to why you have not received a grant, perhaps. Highlighting key points in external reviewers' comments would be, I think, a little difficult for the panel to do. Panels are also so busy preparing an individual feedback for each proposal that has not succeeded would consume a vast amount of time. I think what PIs or applicants should do is look at the totality of the external reviewers' comments. Are there common themes in each of the reviews that you are given to read that highlight a particular thing, a particular point or weakness, and go from there in considering resubmission?
Thank you very much for the informative session. I have two questions. Just now, I heard two things that I was wondering about. One thing is, in the business panel, I think the originality or groundbreakingness is very important. How much is it important in the panel of social science and humanities? And also, it seems, even though there are differences across the panels, chances are that even though you have 4.5, your project might not be funded. What would be your suggestion to make your proposal to really survive this very competitive competition and then make the difference?
You mentioned social science and humanities. 4.5s are generally funded in the humanities and social sciences panel, but sometimes there might be the rare proposal that we feel could really benefit from carefully considering an external reviewer's comments and being resubmitted and then maybe getting a 5. That's your second question. Your first question be innovative. We want to fund new research. We don't want to fund, I'm sure that's true of all panels, we don't want to be funding things that have been done before and you simply want to apply it to another geographical area or a different era in time or something. We want to support projects that are new and innovative in all our fields.
Actually, I want to add one little point because it refers to one case that we have had in this year's exercise, and it is incomplete reference, and maybe this is more relevant for medicine panels and science panels, to literature. And it makes a very bad impression if literature which should be known to the applicant is not referred to. And which makes, for example, if this, especially if this makes the proposed research sort of already past and obsolete. It's very important to have a good background. Short, but to the point.
I would like to, these are very good comments. I would like to add a few more points to it. Sometimes you wonder, right? This year, if your proposal not get funded, and then you look at the reviewers' comments, and then next year you try to fix those things, and then you get different reviewers, and then you get different response. But I think there are still some principles that always make your proposal look strong, which is very important to identify what are the issues, what are the challenges in this very important subject, and then talk about how your idea can address those issues. All the successful proposals, almost all of them do a very good job on this. And also, if you're a junior faculty, you might want to consider leave yourself some time and to have your proposal to be read by the senior faculty, in your mentors. Have them look at your proposal and to see whether they are convinced. And sometimes it might be also a good idea to give it to someone who are not exactly in your field. Because quite often your proposal may be reviewed by maybe half of them are experts, because we do have the situation where the proposals are reviewed by someone who are not very familiar with your proposal. And I think that's fair, because when you try to convince someone to fund you, you really have to write it to the level that even people who are not exactly in that field can be convinced. So try to give your proposal to someone also not exactly in your field, but maybe related, that might be able to give you some good suggestions.
Actually, I can make one more little comment, because you mentioned that some of the reviewers give a 5 and then the application is not funded. And I can very well sympathize with the fact that this is very frustrating. But usually when the panel discuss the applications, and the discussion can be really very in-depth sometimes, it is an overall assessment which is made, where the individual reviewers or external reviewers are matched with the opinion of, or with the evaluation assessment of the primary reader and the second reader. And it is never a one person who gives the judgment or the final score. It is always something which one has discussed. So it is very often, or sometimes we really, as a reader, you are really faced with assessment which go from 5 to 1. And then it is very important that the application is sufficiently clear to be able to distinguish or understand what may generate this great difference. So clarity is essential.
I have a simple question. So, you mentioned it's quite hard to find reviewers. So, will the number of reviewers that you need to find to get enough reviews be taken into account when you design which proposals to be funded?
That's simple. No. You know, it's really about the quality of your proposal. So not about, okay, not being able to find the reviewers to review your proposal. That we're not taking into consideration.
Yeah, but I found that some of my colleagues, they get, at the end, the number of reviewers or the reports that they get is different from me, maybe. So sometimes you get like 3 comments or 4 comments. So will that also affect the result?
Well, let me comment on that. I would say, I think we have to give to RGC a great commending on the work which they have done. Finding a reviewer is very difficult. For the medicine panel, the process has become significantly easier, actually. And one thing which was introduced was the possibility of actually scoring the reviewers, because some reviewers take their job very seriously, and some reviewers don't take their job very seriously. And now we have a system by which the one which obviously don't take their work very seriously are eliminated from the bank. So that is one thing. Then, depending on the application and depending on the particular subject, it is sometimes very easy to find reviewers. So you get application which have 6 independent reviewers, and you get application for which you have to suggest 30 different reviewers in order to get 2. But I think that 2 is the minimum that one will accept, and usually at least 3, but sometimes it's difficult, which means that the application is read by at least 4 people. And I feel, also looking at the system in Sweden, where I come from, that this is a fair number, which ensure fairness, sort of, and a broad understanding of what is happening.
We have a question here, and then in front.
Yes, so first of all, thank you for your really hard work. I realize this is a huge amount of energy spent on these projects. One comment that I have from your multiple comments is that there seem to be significant inequalities in the probabilities of success based on the discipline that you represented from the panels. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are about the fact that a physicist has a 70% chance of being funded, while somebody in the humanities has a 1 in 5 or less chance of being funded, or something like that. What is the thought of you as a collective body, but also the RGC, about this particular question?
On. I cannot speak for other panels. I would like the percentage to be higher for my panel. I don't know why, but to some extent, I think we have funded those projects that we think ought to be funded. Whether we can fund more, yes, I think the answer is. But given the constraint of money, that's the best we could do. I don't know whether across disciplines there are more projects to be acceptable, but for my business panel, it has been, roughly speaking, 33% for the GRF and 40% for the early career scheme. And when I look at those proposals, I think I can live with funding those 40% and 33% respectively for those two groups. Honestly, I would like to fund maybe 10% more, but I certainly don't want to fund 70% of them, that's for sure.
Okay, can I just make one comment? The 70% was actually for the ECS, the young members of staff. and we are very keen to fund as many as possible. So there's a decision you make there whether you fund more and give them less per proposal, or you fund less and give them more, and we made a decision to fund more people because we want to encourage the young staff.
As a member of the Guilty panel, Social Sciences and Humanities, we fund what we see, but we're working within a budget. And so we tried to, this year, as I recall, those proposals that received a 5 and were the highest ranked proposals, we tried to support at a greater level of the budget request than those which got lower scores. And we used up all the money we could. It's a matter of perhaps lobbying the RGC to be nicer to the humanities and social sciences.
To answer your question, I would like to ask you a question. So what is the funding rate of social science?
It's the lowest of all the panels, I think, and I can't remember. It's something like 33%, is it? Is there a panelist here?
So it's about the same.
Higher than 33. 33, okay, 33. Thank you.
So it is about the same as engineering is between 35 to 39 or 40. And I heard from our colleagues saying that for assistant professor to get tenure, they need to get at least 2 RGC funds, right? So that means 2 in 6 years, that's 33%. So our funding rate between 35 and 40. So that means that if you are better than average, if you are above average, you make it. So I think for engineering, I think it seems to be reasonable. And well, 33, I think is about right.
I think humanities, we're much lower. We're like 28% or something. Guilty as charged.
I think maybe I should comment for medicine, because we are at 27% for this year, and it's the same, I believe, last year, maybe 26 or 27 last year. If you look at this in terms of success on an international perspective, this is high. If you look at it in terms of the application that we would like to fund, this is low. We would like to fund some more. And also what is frustrating is that in order to fund this 27%, we are actually making significant cuts, not in the ones which are scored 5 or the highest score, but in all the ones which are scored between 4.5 and 4. And this is frustrating, because the overall amount of money for each individual project is not exceedingly high. And of course, it's a matter of strategy and how the entire supporting system is organized. You're having grants for individual projects so that the successful PI will have 3 or 4 or 5. But it is sometimes difficult to see how the project can be actually executed with the amount of money. So a little bit of reality check in terms of the size of the grant would be desirable. And then maybe, if the success rate of medicine is significantly lower than other panels, maybe one should also consider how the total funds are distributed between the different panels.
Yeah, this is probably a question not for the panels, but for RGC, because we just heard that for the physical and science panel, RGC received a lot of good proposals from the young researchers, but because of the limited of resources, so not many of them can be funded. But we also heard that for the biology and medicine panel, the funding for the young researchers has not been used up. So is there any mechanism from RGC to reshuffle the resources in this kind of cases so that more researchers can be benefited?
Of course, we cannot answer for RGC. But in terms of the medicine panel, and this is a personal question, I think that this is the first time it happens. And we, of course, were a bit surprised and a bit sad. In this context, I think that the universities are the ones who have to do something and support better the young investigators. We had a very interesting visit today at Chinese U. The young investigators are very happy with their life. We would suggest the university to give them even more support in terms of career development, grantmanship, and this kind of activity, because of course it's important. And we don't think that we should lower at the panel, lower the level of the judgment in order to accommodate this. On the contrary, we should use this as an instrument to alert the universities of the importance of supporting the young investigator better.
I would suggest that I think we need to collect more data, because especially for early career, because the number of applications is very low. And so you will see a huge difference in terms of successful rate from year to year. Simply because this year you have maybe 2 more and next year you have 2 less, that changed the percentage significantly. And also funding may be not used up this year, but in the past few years may all get into red. So my point is that the data point may not be enough. If you just look at 1 year, that may be the case. Oh, why you don't use up the money and for this particular year? And that could be because that year, for example, you have suddenly a little bit more applications and the money based on last year, because the fluctuation is high for the early career. Whereas for the regular ones, engineering, 750, 800, 850, right? So the change is not much. But for early career, sometimes you get 10, and then next year you get 15. And then, so they see, you know what I'm saying? So then suddenly there's a 50% increase of number of applications. So that fluctuation is high. So that's the point I'm trying to say.
It's my understanding that the sums for ECS and GRF are fixed, and we cannot shift money from one to the other.
Actually, I have one more comment in that, which comes from the visit we had today. I think that maybe the young investigators, as I understand, their career or the first 6 years is a very hectic time. And the timing on which these applications are made is very important. I think that the university should actually encourage this young investigator to apply immediately on their first year and go for the young investigator before they go from the regular grant. First, because the chance of success is higher. Second, because it is maybe even less dramatic if you don't get funded on the first round. And third, and most important, because by doing that, there is really a push for learning the system. And although many of these young investigators come from other countries and other systems, it is really important to learn how the Hong Kong one works. So this exercise should be pushed through to the young investigator as soon as possible.
More questions? There's one at the back, and then Uta.
So one comment is about the justification of each budget requirements, like for example RA, but from our observation, it seems like there's no correlation of the final funded amount and the original budget. So would the panel discussion really consider the original budget? Because sometimes it takes us some time to basically justify this and that and all the items together, but eventually, they will be all cut anyway.
I haven't done a statistical analysis, so I don't know what is the correlation between the amount requested and the amount funded. But I will say this. I will say if you provide a good certification, it certainly will improve the chance of that being funded. If you don't provide justification, you can pretty sure that we will cut that.
And the panels, when we get down to that level, we don't discuss budgets until the end when we've decided that these scores are good. When discussing the budget, we want to spread the available funds as far as possible. And so when something like an RA position has not been well justified, then that gives us a chance to free up some money for someone further down the list. Uta, you had a comment. Wait.
Are there any statistics about the number of applications in each of the panels? And are these related to the sum that each panel gets assigned? Because the rejection rate depends on that.
I don't think we can answer,
No,
actually.
that's really an answer that only the RGC can give us. What is the basis of the calculation of the proportion of the money to each of the panels? It is adjusted, I think, regularly to reflect maybe levels of application, numbers of applications from year by year. But
There's a formula. There's a formula. It's based on, and they put different weights. It's based on the number of applications for that year, the number of proposals that receive higher than 4.0, and then also look at the previous years. So I think there's like previous years, this year's, and the good quality, number of good quality proposals, and the number of proposals. There's a formula that takes this into consideration to assign the budget for each of the panel.
So just to try and put that in everyday language, does that mean that if you get more, a particular panel gets more poor quality applications, then that will count against you, that panel, when the RGC does its calculations? Because you said high quality, above 4.
In a sense, yes.
Okay.
Because that means if you have more poor quality proposals, that means that good proposals are less. And so if you keep the quality control, then the budget, you don't need that much of a budget for that year.
Right, okay, thank you.
Can I just bring up a point that I think Bill mentioned, that in the physical sciences, the funding rates tend to be higher because you reduce the amount of money so that you can get more people funded. And as a result, physical scientists apply more often. But if you look at funding rate based on fraction of money asked for, then the funding rates come out to be very, very similar. In other words, if let's say 100 million was asked for in the physical sciences, 25 million would be given, but maybe it would go to 50 people instead of to 25 people. So it's not just how many proposals, but you have to think of how much money is being asked for by each panel and what fraction of money that's being asked for. Because in fact, in Hong Kong, the amount of people who have grants and who are funded by the RGC fractionally compared to other countries is higher.
we have 8 more minutes to go, roughly, so now's your chance.
Hello. At the moment, we're also being assessed by the RAE on the basis of things like impact. So when you're assessing these various proposals, how important are things like impact on the local community?
In the business panel, we do pay attention to that, the impact to the society as well as impact to Hong Kong. So I think that plays a role. How big a role, it varies from project to project. So, but in general, it is a plus if you can show that your project has implications for real world applications, has impact to the society, in particular to the Hong Kong society or to the Hong Kong economy, that certainly will be a plus.
I could say the same for the medicine and biology panel, although there are many different ways how to calculate impact. You can calculate immediate impact, and obviously applications that deal with medical problems, which are very important in this area, are noticed. But at the same time, basic science and things which are today not obviously important may become, in fact, the discoveries of the future. So, yes and no.
Yeah, I mean, the application form has a section on long-term impact quite early on in the application. So it's part of the package. But I think from a humanities point of view, we develop a certain skepticism about this word impact or awkwardness because we're in humanities. And so we're judging things on the total package that's being proposed. Impact is a factor, but it's not, central or maybe seemingly as important as it seems to be in the REA exercise. We have I remember on Monday when we spent a whole day discussing the humanities and arts proposals, we noted with one or two proposals, well, this is marginally supportable, but it's related to Hong Kong society, or it is recognizing an aspect of Hong Kong heritage. That helped get it over the line. But we are supporting things from across the world.
Well, I'm new to the system, so I would like to know what are the roles of the first reader and the second reader in the assessment of our proposals. Thank you.
Yeah, the first reader is the person who look at your proposal, and then he or she will then make a decision on where your proposal will be submitted to who are the reviewers. So the first reader select the external reviewers, and then collect the reviews back, and then do the evaluation and put the comment. The second reviewer basically is based on the first reviewer's whatever the external reviews back. So the second reviewer does not have a control of who will be the reviewers. But the second reader also make comments and give the score of your proposal.
I should also add that the first reader, after the reviews come back, they can also decide whether to cut the budget or not. So of course, at the end, it would be the panel's decisions as to what amount that we are going to fund the project, but the first reader will also get first cut when it comes to judging whether the proposed budget is reasonable or not.
And the other point to make is the second reviewer doesn't actually see what the first reviewer has marked before the second reviewer marks it. They're independent.
I could say for the medicine panel, the role of the second reviewer has evolved a bit over the years. And I think the input of the second reviewer has become more important. And it is very much taken into consideration to the extent that some of the grants where there are some uncertainties, there are very lively discussions between the first and the second reviewers on the importance. So the second reviewer plays an important role. It's a sort of a quality check and, of what is happening to the application. And I think it's a good thing for the application that this has evolved in this way.
So the first reader of a proposal looks at the external reviews, and she also reads the proposal carefully and writes a fairly extensive report on its strengths and weaknesses and recommendations. The second reader writes a briefer report before the panels convene. At the panel sessions this week here in Hong Kong, the first reader and the second reader both present their views of the proposal for the complete panel's consideration. And so they are the primary sources of reporting on the strengths and suitability of a proposal for support. So they have an important role, but it's not their role alone in making decisions. It's a group consensus on whether this proposal is supportable or not, guided by the first and second readers in particular. Is there one last question? If not, then thank you to our panelists and thank you all for coming.
Thank you, panel chairman and their representatives. And I would also like to thank the members of the RGC and subject panels, vice presidents of the universities, and all of you for coming today. I believe you have a fruitful exchange of ideas during the forum. I would also like to thank the Chinese University of Hong Kong for organizing the visits for the members of the RGC and subject panels. Thank you very much.